My guy left France because he said, I'm out of Dodge. They're not getting my head. He left. St. Bartholomew's Day in Paris, to give you an idea, that one day they chopped off 8,000 Protestant heads in the guillotines in one day. You saw a guillotine in that picture. You do remember that, don't you, Allie? I thought you said, what's that? You said that to me. That was that guillotine. Guillotine was designed by a Frenchman. All kinds of information history, go study it. At this point, I'd like to introduce Mark Biazi, whom I met 4 months ago. And when I first heard that you were going to do tonight, I drove 900 miles to be with you. And my interest is still, although I don't live here, it's still with you. Wonderful people in this country. And continue your excitement because it gives you gray hair and keeps you alive. Mark?
Well, I thought my kids were nervous until I heard that Tom drove 900 miles to be with me tonight. Now the pressure's on me. Thank you, Tom. I wanted to make a couple of comments. Marie, I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you so much. That was really wonderful. And there's a couple of things in there that I found really interesting, one of which amplified and elaborated on something that I discovered while doing this project, really, with the students. And that was the diversity of viewpoints that the French people, the French emigres, brought with them to this country. You know, the textbook understanding of the French presence during the revolutionary period is that they formed into these democratic clubs that were linked to Thomas Jefferson's Republican Party, and they were the target of John Adams' Alien and Sedition Acts. But what you don't really get is that picture of the more conservative royalist elements coming as well. So it's kind of a mixed bag, and I thought that was really interesting. You brought that out really well, so I enjoyed that part of it. The other thing was, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce this Frenchman's name. I've been struggling with this through the entire project. In fact, I've had the students practicing each of their French family names, and they've got it down pretty good, and I guess I could probably say those. But there was one gentleman who wrote a pamphlet called Letters from an American Farmer. What was his name? No. Krefke. I saw the way the O and the E's were sort of pressed together there. That all looked very interesting. I like that. And I know that has something to do with the pronunciation, but I'm not sure what. But anyway, I thought that was very interesting too, just a little tiny tidbit, because there were a number of pamphlets called Letters from an American Farmer that were written during the Revolutionary period. And what was interesting to me about that is that it was really sort of wealthy revolutionaries, American revolutionaries, that were trying to hide behind the mantle of the average farmer. So like John Dickinson wrote Letters from an American Farmer. And it was, you know, it was actually a fairly moderate pro-revolutionary pamphlet, but he didn't want to come across as John Dickinson. They often wrote under pseudonyms. In this case, it was Letter from an American Farmer, to make it sound like it was sort of that the revolution was more of a grassroots movement than one being led by intellectuals and more well-off colonists. So I thought that was kind of interesting. He borrowed that same title for his work. Anyway, so I'm here today to talk just a little bit about what my students have been doing for the last month, I think, on and off. And that is, they have been taking a look at the French immigration here to America. And specifically, they've been looking at some of the founding families that Marie has mentioned, and there's a couple of others that came to this region and to the Bottle Hill area, and trying to just get a little bit of an understanding of why they came and what contributions they made while they were here. So let me tell you just a little bit about how we've approached the project. And it's, you know, I was very heartened by your presentation, because you kind of set it up exactly the way I set up the project for the kids, which is to look at the sort of what we call the push factors, what's causing people to leave France or leave the Caribbean, And then the pull factors, why would they come settle here in Bottle Hill? So we began the unit by just looking at these push and pull factors. They each had a packet to read, and they took a look, and we did some discussion in class about, what caused these Frenchmen to leave where they were, what were the conditions like, and then what caused them to come and settle here in Bottle Hill. And after we did that, we kind of broke the push factors down into three waves of immigration. And I set this up in this way for a couple of reasons. One, I just think it sort of makes sense from a conceptual standpoint. But number two, the next unit of study that we're going to be engaged in is on the Industrial Revolution, and we're going to be looking at the immigration of Irishmen and Germans to the United States. And so I wanted them to get thinking in terms of, push factors, pull factors, waves of immigration. We're going to be looking at the first wave. Next year in US 2, they'll be looking at the second wave of immigration, which is mostly Southern and Eastern Europe, the Italians, the Greeks, and Jews and other people. So after we looked at the push-pull factors, we divided the French immigration into three waves. The first wave is what Tom talked about a little bit, which is the French Huguenots. The second wave would be the wave that I guess Lafayette was associated with, which is the soldiers that came during the American Revolution. And then the third wave is the folks that Marie really focused on, is the people fleeing the revolution, revolutionary France. And I had the students in groups of three, and each one of the group members was to look at one of those waves and just try to get a little bit of a better handle on who these people were and what were the conditions like in France and what would cause them to emigrate to the United States. So that was the second thing that we did. And then we took those groups of three and we broke them up into looking at different families. And a couple of the groups are a little bit different than the others. I mean, for the most part, we have students looking at French settlers and their immediate families that came to this area. But we also have two sort of wild card groups. One group looked at Lafayette and investigated his contribution to the revolution and his influence in this area. And then another group sort of looked at we went back to the wave thing with them. And what they needed to do was to take sort of a little snapshot of Bottle Hill during each of those waves of immigration. So their poster board is broken up into three parts, one part for each of the waves. And I asked them to just tell us a little bit about what Bottle Hill looked like at those three different time periods. Okay, so that's the background. That's how we ended up here. The students have really done a great job. They've worked for the last 3 days or so to put the posters together, and it's been really fun watching them do that. The research was interesting and fun as well. We had the opportunity, as Kathy mentioned, to come down to the Historical Society and go through some of the archives and look at some of the materials that are on hand here, and we're very grateful to the members of the Historical Society for making them available to us and for helping to pull some things out for the kids. So we're really grateful for that. We could not have learned as much as we did without their assistance, so thank you. So I guess that's it. What I'd like to ask the students to do is to set their display posters up along the front table here, and then to just sort of stand in front of them, and I'll kind of see if I can ask them a few questions, and they'll point out some of the things on the poster that they learned. So guys, you want to come on up and find your poster and stretch them out along the edge there? And Sophia made me promise to give her a mic, so we'll give them a mic and they can sort of pass them along.